The night Kyle Ardeen was born, the kingdom of Arendor slept uneasily. A restless wind swept through the noble estate of House Ardeen, rattling the lanterns and bending the silver branches of the moon trees that lined the courtyard. Within the chamber, the Lady Serenia clutched her newborn son to her chest, her face pale from exhaustion, yet softened by a smile meant only for him. His cry was faint, more a whimper than the triumphant wail of an infant. Still, to her, it was beautiful, fragile music. The midwives whispered among themselves, troubled by the strange stillness that accompanied his birth. There was no rush of elemental energy, no spark of the veil answering the arrival of new life. In Arendor, every child of noble blood was blessed by the veil, their first cry echoing with the shimmer of magic. But Kyle's birth was silent, unlit, as though the veil had turned its face away.
Too late. I want trouble. Watch this
Lord
fire,
Ardeen,
commoner.
proud and stern, pressed a hand to his brow. "Seal it," he whispered to the council mage who lingered in the shadows. "Seal the truth, if it has not already been sealed by fate."
Their light
The
guides
mage
my path.
obeyed, drawing
I
a
will not fall
circle of
forth.
light that sank into the
My
child's
best is
chest.
written in the cosmos.
Something unseen locked within him, binding his soul. Lady Serenia wept softly, kissing her child's forehead. She had no words for the sorrow she felt, only the instinctive ache of a mother who knew her son's path would not be easy. From that night onward, Kyle bore the mark of silence. As he grew, the other children of the noble houses called him Hollow. In their training yards, they conjured sparks of fire and danced with blades infused with elemental glow, while Kyle's sword remained heavy and unblessed. When he tried to mimic them, laughter followed. "You are cursed,
Awaken,
a vessel with
ancient
nothing
power.
inside."
I call upon the
Kyle
light
endured
within.
their taunts with a clenched jaw and a gaze fixed on
Transform and
horizons
rise.
others never cared to notice. There was always
Where
a
am
yearning
I?
in him, a quiet pull towards something beyond
isn't
his
right.
reach. At night, when the manor lay still, he would sit beneath the moon trees, watching the petals drift down like silver snow and whisper promises to the stars. "I will not be empty forever," he vowed. "One day the veil will answer me." His tutors despaired. They urged him to accept his limits, to master diplomacy and swordplay without magic. But Kyle's heart rebelled. He wanted to burn with fire as others did, to feel the surge of wind beneath his steps, to wield light that could cut through darkness. He wanted to be more than a hollow shadow trailing behind brighter suns. In his loneliest hours, he dreamed of someone who might see him not as cursed, but as whole. The thought came to him unbidden, a flicker of tenderness that softened the sharp edges of his struggle. He imagined a hand reaching for his, steady and warm, as though the universe itself whispered,
Why,
"You are
Lyra?
not
Why
broken.
keep me in the dark?
You are
It was
waiting."
necessary. You must trust me.
The years
Trust
passed,
after
and
this betrayal?
Kyle's defiance only grew sharper.
It was for the greater good, Kale.
When sparring partners mocked him,
You think
he
you can
pushed
outmaneuver
harder,
me?
his body
I
bruised,
don't
but
think,
his
Kale,
spirit
I know.
unyielding.
You're
When
bluffing.
elders dismissed him,
Am I?
he studied ancient
me.
texts by candlelight, searching
What
for
are you
fragments of
hiding?
knowledge about the veil.
Nothing but the truth.
He read of soul binders and forbidden
Your eyes
hearts,
tell a different
of
story.
destinies sealed and
Then look
unsealed.
closer.
Each word was like a stone in the foundation of his resolve. At 16, standing alone in the frost-laden courtyard, he pressed his palm to his chest.
What's
"I
your
will
name?
not be empty,"
You
he
first.
whispered. "If my soul is locked, then I will find the key. If I am cursed, I will curse fate in return."
Lyra.
But despite his fierce declarations, there were nights when weariness overtook him. He would sink to his knees beneath the moon trees,
I need you to
clutching
teach me.
the hilt of his
should
practice
I?
blade, tears hidden
Because I'm
in the
ready to
shadow
learn.
of falling
Teach me.
petals. The
It's not that
loneliness was a
simple. I
weight
won't
he
give
could
up.
not always
Teach me.
bear. And yet, even in sorrow, he never fully broke. Something gentle always rose within him, hope, fragile but luminous, like the first
I
light
offer
of dawn.
myself as your student.
One
why
evening,
should
as
I
the
accept
sky
you?
burned with
Because my
sunset,
heart is
he
true,
found himself
and I will
wandering the
learn.
manor's
Then
old
rise
garden,
and
where
begin your
roses
path.
bloomed untended. The petals were soft, their fragrance carried by the breeze. He paused, brushing his fingers across one blossom, and for a moment it seemed to glow faintly beneath his touch. It could have been a trick of light, or perhaps a memory of magic stirring where none should exist. Kyle smiled faintly, whispering to the flower as if it were a confidant. Perhaps even the cursed may be loved. The words lingered in the air, tender and uncertain. Though he spoke to no one, his heart carried the weight of yearning, as if somewhere beyond the veil, someone had already heard him. His mother often came to him then, draping a cloak around his shoulders, her touch lingering with quiet affection. "You are not hollow, Kyle," she would murmur. "You are waiting to be filled. The veil keeps secrets even from us." Those words were his anchor, his comfort against the storms of doubt. He clung to them not as truth, but as a possibility worth believing in. And so Kyle Ardeen grew into a young man both scarred and softened by his struggles. He carried within him the sharpness of defiance and the gentleness of longing. The world called him cursed, but in the depths of his soul, he knew another name was waiting, one that would be written not by the cruelty of fate, but by the hand of love. For every lonely night, for every whispered vow beneath the moon trees, for every secret tear shed into the silence, Kyle carried a dream. One day, he believed, someone would look upon him not as hollow, but as whole. Someone whose gaze would unlock the sealed depths of his being, and in that moment he would no longer be cursed. He would be found. And though he could not yet see her face, he loved her already, in the way one loves the promise of dawn after the longest night. The battlefield was a sea of smoke and ruin, lit by the eerie glow of dying flames. Lyra Vera moved like a phantom among the chaos, her blade dripping crimson, her eyes cold as winter steel. To her enemies, she was more myth than woman, the shadow sorceress who struck without mercy. For years, her name alone had been enough to silence tavern chatter and make noblemen tremble in their gilded halls. But even shadows can be betrayed. Tonight, she had been promised victory. The council had marked her enemies for death, and she had obeyed, striking swiftly through the heart of their camp. But when the signal fires rose, she realized too late the trap was not for them, it was for her. From the ridges, hidden mages released their chains of light. Golden glyphs snared the ground beneath her feet, binding her shadow to the earth. Lyra cursed, summoning the veil's energy, but for every spell she conjured, another broke it apart. Her allies were gone, scattered, or slain. She had been cast aside, a weapon no longer useful, discarded with ruthless calculation. Her breath came sharp as she fought, but the wounds grew too many. A dagger pierced her shoulder. A blast of searing light burned across her side. She staggered, clutching her blade, and for the first time in years, fear coiled in her chest. The betrayal was absolute. "Lyra Vera," called a voice from the ridge. High Seer Malric's voice, smooth, cruel. "Your era is over. The council thanks you for your service." Hatred flared through her veins. She spat blood into the dirt, her lips curving into a defiant smile even as her knees trembled. "I'll hunt you," she rasped, "even in death." The circle closed tighter. Light spears rained down. Her body faltered, collapsing onto the blood-soaked ground. Around her, the world dimmed, sound fading into the dull roar of her heartbeat. But Lyra Vera was not the kind to surrender, not even to death. Deep within her sleeve lay a charm forbidden by the council, a shard of obsidian etched with runes of soul-binding. She had taken it years ago, knowing one day it might be her last refuge. Now, with her vision narrowing, she pressed it to her chest. "Not yet," she whispered. The shard blazed. Agony tore through her, flesh unraveling, soul shattering. She felt her body disintegrate, felt her essence ripped from bone and blood. The battlefield vanished, consumed by a whirl of shadow and fire. Her scream was soundless, swallowed into the veil itself. And then, silence. When Lyra opened her eyes, the world was small. The ceiling above her was low, thatched and cracked. The air was heavy with smoke from a hearth. Her limbs trembled, frail and weak, nothing like the body she once commanded. She raised her hand and gasped. The fingers were thin, calloused, smeared with ash, not hers. Stumbling to a cracked mirror, she stared at the reflection that gazed back. A servant girl, plain, fragile, with weary eyes that had seen years of drudgery. The body was feeble, drained, a vessel barely capable of channeling magic. Lyra's stomach twisted. She gripped the wooden frame until her knuckles whitened. Her soul binding had worked, but cruelly. She had escaped death, only to awaken in the weakest form imaginable. Memories flickered, half her own, half belonging to the girl whose body she now wore. Days of carrying water, scrubbing floors, bowing to masters who never saw her face. A life of invisibility. It sickened Lyra, yet it also saved her. No one would search for the feared assassin in such a pitiful shell. Her strength was gone, but her mind remained sharp, her hatred burning hotter than ever. She would endure. She would sharpen her will until the world bent again to her hand, and one day she would make the traitors pay. Still, when the night grew quiet and she lay on the straw pallet of her borrowed life, doubts crept in. She touched her chest, where the obsidian shard had dissolved, leaving a faint scar over her heart. Beneath it, her soul flickered dimly, like a flame caged in glass. Was this survival or punishment? She remembered the girl's last memory before Lyra's soul consumed hers. A fleeting dream of being loved, of someone looking at her not as a servant, but as a person. The echo lingered, foreign yet achingly tender, slipping through Lyra's iron defenses. For the first time she wondered what it might be like, not to be feared, not to be used, but to be seen. She shook the thought away, forcing her heart to harden. Love was weakness, trust was poison. She had trusted once, and betrayal had answered, never again. Yet, in the quiet corners of her new existence, she found herself watching the noble children she served, watching the way they laughed without fear, watching the way kindness passed unnoticed between them. Something stirred inside her, something she did not want to name. The assassin was gone, but the woman remained, and though she vowed to bury it beneath layers of steel, a small, unyielding piece of her longed for the impossible, that in this frail body someone might one day look at her and not see a shadow of death, but a soul worth saving. For now, however, survival demanded silence. She tied back her hair, lowered her gaze, and bowed as the other servants did. No one glanced twice at her. That anonymity became her armor, her secret refuge. But in the high of proud, Lyra Veyra remained, waiting, watching, plotting. Her fall was complete, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of something darker, something unexpected. She did not know yet that the path ahead would bring her face to face with the boy called Cursed. She did not know that his yearning and her scars would entwine like threads of the same tapestry. All she knew was this: she had fallen from the height of power to the depths of obscurity, and in the ruin of betrayal, she had been given a new face, a new prison, and perhaps, though she would never admit it, a chance at something she had never sought. redemption. The manor's training yard was alive with sparks of light. Young nobles swung their blades, calling fire to their edges or bending the air to quicken their strikes. Their laughter echoed with arrogance, each display of magic another reminder of what Cale Ardeen lacked. He stood apart, sword heavy in his hands, sweat dripping into his eyes. He struck again and again at the wooden post until splinters flew, yet no glow answered his movements. His arms ached, his chest heaved, but there was only silence where others wielded flame. "You'll break your blade before you ever break your curse," one boy sneered, tossing a flame from palm to palm. The group laughed, their voices like needles. "You," he said slowly, "you're not like the others." The girl shrugged. "Perhaps I am simply tired of fools who mistake shouting for power." Her words stung, but they also sparked something in him. A thought, wild and ridiculous, but irresistible. What if this girl, with her sharp tongue and steady eyes, saw what no tutor, no noble, no council mage ever had? "What is your name?" he pressed. "Lyra," she answered without hesitation. The false name slid easily from her lips, though inside, her heart clenched. To give her true name would be to reveal herself, to invite death. "Lyra," Cale repeated, tasting the sound as though it were a secret. "Teach me." The brush slipped from her hand. She looked up fully this time, eyes narrowing. "Teach you? Do I look like a tutor?" "You don't look like a servant either," Cale shot back. "Your eyes are too sharp. You watch like someone who has fought, not bowed. Don't deny it." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the trickle of the fountain. Lyra's instincts screamed to laugh, to dismiss him, yet something in his gaze stopped her. The raw, aching hunger for strength, the refusal to bow to fate. She knew that look. She had worn it once herself. "Even if I could teach you, why would I? What do you offer me?" Cale leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I offer you this. I will not see you as a servant. Teach me, and I'll treat you as my master." The words startled even him, but once spoken, they rang with truth. He needed her, and perhaps she, strange as she was, needed him too. Lyra's chest tightened. Master. The word was bitter, ironic. Once she had commanded armies, struck terror into the council itself. Now, in this weak shell, a desperate boy dared to offer her the title. She almost laughed at the absurdity. And yet, he could be useful. If she guided him, perhaps his untapped potential might open doors for her. Through him, she might find a path back to power, to vengeance. Her lips curved into a faint, sardonic smile. "Very well, noble boy. I'll teach you. But understand this, I am not gentle. If you follow me, you will bleed. If you hesitate, you will break." Cale's heart pounded. He dropped to one knee before her, gripping his sword hilt in both hands, bowing his head. "Then break me until I am strong. I would rather bleed beneath your hand than rot as I am." The garden seemed to still. Moonlight glimmered on the fountain's water, casting pale light across their faces. And there, beneath the indifferent stars, their pact was sealed. Reluctant, dangerous, and fragile as glass, neither yet knew the path it would lead them down, or how deeply their lives would entwine. But in the silent garden, Beneath the falling petals, destiny took its first breath. The garden became their secret sanctuary. By day, it remained untended, a forgotten corner of the manor where roses sprawled wild and ivy clawed the stone walls. By night, it was theirs, Kale's battleground and Lyra's classroom. The moonlight turned the fountain silver, the air filled with the hush of falling petals. And there, beneath the indifferent stars, their pact unfolded. Lyra stood with arms crossed, her plain servant's garb rustling in the breeze. She ordered, "Pick up your sword." Her voice carried no warmth, no indulgence. It was the tone of command she had once used for killers and soldiers, sharpened by years of survival. Kale obeyed, without question, his sweat already glistening on his brow. He swung the blade in practiced arcs, his muscles taut with effort. But Lyra's gaze was unforgiving. "Wrong," she snapped. "Your stance is weak. You fight like a child flailing at shadows." "I've trained for years," he retorted, teeth clenched. "Trained poorly," she countered. "If you were my enemy, you'd already be dead." Her words stung, but Kale forced his jaw tight and raised the sword again. He swung, stumbled, corrected, and swung again. Every time she criticized, he adjusted, his pride battling his exhaustion. Hours passed, the moon climbing higher until his arms shook violently. But he pressed on. Lyra's sharp eyes softened briefly, just a flicker, before she masked it with another cutting remark. "Pathetic. You're barely standing." Kale dropped to his knees, gasping, but his eyes burned with defiance. "Then break me more. I won't stop until I'm strong enough." Something in his voice stilled her. The boy had no magic, no inherited glow, yet his will was relentless. Lyra recognized that hunger. It was the same fire that had once driven her through blood and betrayal. Against her better judgment, she felt a thread of reluctant respect tighten around her. "Very well," she murmured. "If you insist on drowning, I'll make sure the river is deep." The nights grew longer, harsher. She taught him not only swordplay, but awareness, how to hear the whisper of steps behind him, how to read the intent in another's eyes, how to move with precision instead of brute force. He bled often, knuckles split, skin scraped, bruises blooming across his arms. Each wound became a lesson, each failure a stone in the foundation of his growth. Yet beneath her ruthlessness, Lyra studied him. When he fell, he always rose. When mocked, he bit down on pride and tried again. He never begged for easier tasks, never sought pity. Slowly, grudgingly, she began to believe he might become more than a hollow air. One night, as the first frost silvered the garden, Kale collapsed mid-swing. His chest heaved, breath visible in the cold air. "I can't," he whispered, face pale. "Then you are worthless after all." His head snapped up, anger flaring. "I'm not worthless," he shouted, slamming the sword into the ground to prop himself upright. "I may be cursed, but I will not be nothing. I will prove myself, even if it kills me." The fountain shimmered suddenly, rippling though no wind stirred it. For an instant, a faint glow flickered around Kale's body, pale and fleeting, like moonlight brushing skin. Lyra's eyes widened. It was impossible, yet undeniable. The veil had stirred. Kale, panting, hadn't noticed it, but she had. She stepped back, her heart pounding in her borrowed chest. A sealed destiny? A cursed birth? And now this spark? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Dangerous. If the council discovered this, They would either chain him or destroy him. She should have ended this alliance, severed the risk before it bloomed. Yet, watching him kneel in the frost, clutching his blade with shaking hands, something inside her faltered. "You're not finished," she said instead. He blinked up at her, sweat dripping into his eyes. "What?" "Get up." Her tone softened only slightly, but enough to jolt him. "If you want to prove yourself, then stand. Again." Kel gritted his teeth, forcing his body upright despite the agony. His legs trembled, but he raised the sword once more. Lyra turned away briefly, hiding the faintest curve of her lips. The boy was maddening, but he was hers now. Days turned into weeks. Wordlessly, their bond deepened. Kel began to anticipate her critiques, adjusting before she spoke. She began to hold her blows a fraction shorter, testing him without breaking him. Their conversations remained edged with sarcasm and challenge, yet underneath, a subtle rhythm grew. One evening, after a grueling session, Kel sank beside the fountain, dipping his hands into the cool water. Lyra lingered nearby, arms folded. "You push me past my limits every night," he said, voice hoarse. "Do you hate me that much?" She raised an eyebrow. "If I hated you, you'd already be dead." He chuckled softly, surprising them both. "Then maybe you care more than you pretend." Her chest tightened. Care. The word unsettled her more than any blade. She scoffed, masking the unease. "Don't flatter yourself." But when he turned his gaze to the water, she allowed herself a fleeting glance. The moonlight reflected in his eyes, clear and steady, despite exhaustion. For a moment, she saw not a cursed heir, but a boy whose heart refused to bow. And against her will, warmth brushed the edges of her guarded soul. She turned away quickly, muttering, "Tomorrow we train harder." "Tomorrow," he echoed, smiling faintly. That night, as Kel drifted into exhausted sleep, Lyra sat awake beneath the moon trees. She traced the faint scar over her heart, the mark of her forbidden survival. Once, she had thought herself beyond redemption, a blade without softness. Yet this boy, this foolish, stubborn boy, was cracking the armor she had forged from blood and shadows. It was dangerous. She should distance herself. And yet she did not move. The garden remained quiet, the fountain whispering softly, as though keeping their secret. Neither spoke of the bond taking root between them, but it was there, fragile, undeniable, and growing stronger with every scar, every lesson, every glance held too long. Kel trained in shadows, and in those shadows, something far greater than power began to awaken. The first whispers came from old scrolls Kel found hidden in the manor's library. Dust choked the air as he pried open shelves long forgotten, candlelight flickering against faded ink. Lyra stood watch at the door, her arms folded, feigning disinterest, yet her eyes lingered on him as he traced the curling letters. "The Council of Mages, prophecy of the Veil's child," Kel murmured, frowning. The words tugged at him, threads unraveling the fabric of his life. Lyra shifted. "Put it back. Knowledge like that is forbidden for a reason." "Which reason?" he pressed, defiant. "Because it's dangerous or because it's true?" She did not answer. Night after night, Kel returned, piecing together fragments. He learned of a prophecy whispered centuries ago. A child born with the veil's mark would bring either salvation or ruin, tearing open the barrier between life and death. To prevent catastrophe, the council vowed to suppress such a soul, binding it before it could awaken. And suddenly, Kel understood the silence at his birth, the mockery that had haunted him all his life. He was not cursed by chance. He was bound. Deliberately. His fists clenched around the scroll. They feared me before I could even breathe. Watching his shoulders tremble, her jaw was tight. She had suspected something lay behind his sealed fate, but this truth was heavier than she had imagined. A bound soul, a prophecy of ruin, and sparks already stirring within him. If unleashed, his power might rival even her own, perhaps surpass it. She should have been wary, but instead an odd shiver of anticipation ran through her. When Cale finally turned, his eyes burned. "Tell me, Lyra, do you think I'm a danger? Is that why they sealed me?" She held his gaze. Danger is a matter of perspective. To your enemies, yes. To yourself, perhaps. To me, she hesitated, then said quietly, "No, not yet." His chest eased at her words, though doubt still gnawed at him. "Then help me break it. Help me unseal what they fear." Lyra's heart thudded. She remembered her own hunger for power, how it had led her into the council's service, and finally, their betrayal. She saw the same hunger in him, but tempered by something else, something softer. "You don't know what you're asking. Power of that kind doesn't come without a cost. The veil is not merciful. I've lived with chains my whole life. Whatever the cost, I'll pay it." For a moment, silence filled the library. The candle flickered, casting shadows across their faces. Lyra looked at him and felt the sharp edges of her resolute bend. Against reason, against caution, she nodded. "Very well, but I'll decide how far you go. One misstep, and I'll end this." He smiled faintly, as if her reluctant consent was victory enough. From then, their training changed. No longer was it only sword drills and endurance. Lyra began to teach him to listen, to feel the currents of the veil beneath the surface of the world. They sat by the fountain, Cale's eyes closed, her voice guiding him like a thread. "Do not reach outward, reach inward. Your soul is sealed, yes, but even a cage leaks light. Find that spark." Hours passed with nothing but his ragged breathing. Frustration coiled in him, yet Lyra's voice steadied him. "Patience. Power is not seized. It is courted like a flame. Too much breath and it dies. Too little and it smolders unseen." At last, a flicker stirred. Cale's chest tightened, heat pulling beneath his ribs. His eyes snapped open as a faint shimmer danced across his palm, a thread of silver light. It vanished in a heartbeat, but it had been real. He stared, trembling, then laughed breathlessly. "I felt it! I felt it!" Lyra's lips curved into a reluctant smile. She had not expected him to succeed so soon. The sight of his joy unsettled her more than any threat. It warmed her in ways she could not admit. But when she looked closer, a pang of unease followed. The glow she had seen was not ordinary. It carried the weight of the veil itself, ancient and dangerous. That night, while Cale slept, she remained awake watching the moonlight spill across the garden. She pressed her hand over her borrowed heart, whispering to herself, "What are you, boy? Salvation or ruin?" The days blurred into weeks. Cale grew stronger, his movements more precise, his senses sharper. The spark of light returned more often, sometimes flaring when his emotions ran high. Once, in a moment of frustration, the fountain's water had surged upward, shimmering like liquid stars, before collapsing. He had laughed in awe. Lyra, however, had stood frozen, the weight of prophecy heavy in her chest. Still, she did not stop him. Instead, she tempered his eagerness with brutal honesty. "Control it, or it controls you. Desire without discipline will consume you. And if it does," he challenged, "then I'll end you myself." Their eyes locked. Neither spoke further, but the unspoken truth lingered. She meant it, yet she hoped she'd never have to keep that promise. One evening, Kale found her sitting by the fountain, her face caught in the glow of lantern light. He hesitated, then said softly, "You knew, didn't you? From the moment you saw me, you knew I wasn't hollow." Lyra's gaze flickered to his, unreadable. "I knew you were dangerous. Whether that danger is a curse or a gift remains to be seen." He stepped closer, voice low. "And if it's both?" For a heartbeat, the air thickened between them. Lyra's chest tightened, her carefully built walls straining. She looked away, rising swiftly. "Enough questions. Tomorrow we test your limits." But as she walked ahead, her thoughts betrayed her. Kale Ardeen was no longer simply her tool, no longer just her means of survival. He was something more, something she had not expected, something that frightened and intrigued her in equal measure. And though she told herself otherwise, part of her had already chosen. She would follow this boy into whatever destiny awaited, even if it let both of them into ruin. The days turned warmer as spring unfurled its blossoms across the Ardeen estate. Kale's training had grown relentless, but alongside bruises and exhaustion bloomed a fragile bond between student and teacher. Lyra still barked orders with icy precision, but in the quiet moments between strikes and lessons, her eyes softened, just slightly. Kale noticed every flicker. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, he collapsed beneath the moon tree in the garden, his chest heaving. Lyra tossed him a cloth. "Wipe your sweat before it blinds you. A dead pupil is a useless one." He caught it with a laugh, though his limbs trembled. "You pretend to care little, but if I died, who would entertain you with my failures?" Her lips twitched, nearly a smile. "Failures are plentiful, you're hardly unique." "And yet," he teased, "you stay." Lyra turned away, unwilling to admit that his persistence had begun to anchor her in ways she had not expected. She had told herself he was merely her means to regaining strength, a vessel to manipulate. But his warmth, his stubborn loyalty unsettled her. When Kale's laughter faded, his tone turned quieter. "Do you ever wonder, Lyra, if fate could be changed?" Her hand stilled on the hilt of her dagger. She thought of her betrayal, her fall, her stolen body. Fate to her was a cruel master. Change? No. At best, you endure it. At worst, it crushes you. Kale shook his head, staring up at the stars. "Then I'll change it. For myself and for you." The words pierced her. For her. She hated the warmth that spread in her chest, hated the way it weakened her resolve. She forced her voice to sharpen. "Dream less, boy. The world isn't kind to dreamers." But when he drifted to sleep against the tree, she remained beside him, watching the rise and fall of his breath, as though guarding a secret too fragile to name. It was Illyra who noticed first. Daughter of a noble ally, she had known Kale since childhood. She was quick-witted, loyal, and though she rarely admitted it, her feelings for him ran deeper than friendship. So when she began seeing him slip away at odd hours, his clothes dirty, his hands bruised, suspicion bloomed. One afternoon, she followed quietly through the manor's corridors, her heart pounding. He led her to the old garden, abandoned for years until recently revived. There, she froze. Kale sparred with a servant girl, not merely sparred, fought with a fire she had never seen in him before. The girl's movements were sharp, precise, her eyes glowing with something dangerous. She disarmed him in seconds, pressing a blade to his throat. And Kale laughed. Illyra's heart clenched. He looked at the girl the way he had never looked at her, with trust, with awe. She stepped forward. "Kale." Both froze. Lyra slid her dagger away, her face unreadable. Kale stumbled back, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Illyra, I can explain." "Explain?" Her voice trembled. "Since when do you train with servants? Since when do you keep secrets from me?" Kale reached for her, but she pulled away. Jealousy burned through her chest, mingling with fear. Who is this girl? Why does she carry herself not as a servant, but as something more? Lyra remained silent, watching carefully. This was the danger Cale had warned him of. Exposure. Illyra, please, Cale urged. She's helping me, teaching me what no one else would. Why her? Why not trust me? I've stood by you always. Because you never believed in me, Cale thought, though the words caught in his throat. Illyra had pitied him, defended him at times, but she had never seen him the way Lyra did, not as broken, but as someone worth sharpening. Lyra finally spoke, her tone cool. Leave, girl. This is none of your concern. Illyra's eyes flashed. You think I'll let some servant manipulate him? I don't know what game you're playing, but I'll uncover it. Cale stepped between them, desperation in his gaze. Illyra, stop. She's not what you think. That's the problem, Illyra snapped, voice thick with hurt. I don't know what to think anymore. She turned and stormed away, leaving Cale stricken. When silence fell again, Lyra crossed her arms. She will expose us. No, Cale said firmly, though his heart ached. Illyra would never betray me. She's angry, yes, but loyal. She'll keep the secret. Lyra's eyes narrowed. You trust too easily. And you not at all. He countered. Their gazes locked, the air tense between them. For a moment, the argument dissolved into something heavier, an unspoken recognition of how close they stood, of the warmth humming beneath their hostility. Cale swallowed, his voice dropping. But I do trust you, Lyra, even when I shouldn't. Her breath caught. She should have pushed him away, reminded him that trust was dangerous, that affection was weakness. Instead, she turned sharply, hiding the conflict in her eyes. Fool, trust me and you may regret it. But when Cale's hand brushed hers, just briefly, she did not pull away. The days that followed were strained. Cale and Lyra continued their training, but Illyra lingered at the edges, watching, questioning. Her loyalty to Cale warred with jealousy, her instincts screaming that the servant girl was more she appeared. One night, she confronted him again. Cale, I don't care if you're training in secret. I care that you're hiding things from me. I care that she's taking you from me. He looked at her, torn. Illyra, you're my friend. You always will be. But she... His words faltered. How could he explain what Lyra was to him, when even he didn't understand? Illyra's eyes filled with unshed tears. Then answer me this. Do you trust her more than you trust me? His silence was answer enough. She left without another word, and in the garden that night, Cale stared at Lyra with new clarity. Their bond was dangerous, fragile, perhaps doomed, but he could not deny it. Fate had thrown them together, and despite every warning, he was already hers. And Lyra, for all her denials, was no longer free of him, either. The Council of Magi convened beneath the obsidian spires of Ariandor's citadel, their voices echoing through the grand chamber like the hiss of serpents. At the head of the long crescent table sat High Seer Melric, his robes of midnight blue pulling like shadows around him. His eyes pale as frozen rivers surveyed the bickering nobles and mages with silent calculation. The old laws bind us, one elder protested, pounding his staff upon the floor. If we allow whispers of soul binding to spread, we unravel the foundations of order itself. And if we ignore it, another countered, we risk falling behind those who wield it already. The common folk whisper of new powers in the alleys. Sorcery we once forbade now thrives in secret. Can we afford blindness?
Malric let them argue, knowing their fear would ripen into obedience. At last he stood, and silence followed like a curtain falling. The veil stirs, he said, his voice smooth, measured. For centuries, we have claimed mastery over what lies beyond, yet our grasp weakens. You all feel it, the thinning between worlds, the tremors of unshackled souls. Balance falters, order frays. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Malric's gaze hardened. but balance may yet be restored. There is a boy, Cale Arden, born cursed, they say, born sealed. What they do not know, but I do, is that within him lies the key to the veil itself. The chamber erupted into gasps. The ardent heir? One noble demanded. That boy is nothing, powerless, mocked by his own house. Powerless by design, Malric replied coldly. The council sealed his soul at birth to forestall a prophecy of ruin. Yet all prophecies are but roads we choose to walk, or not. With guidance, the boy may become salvation rather than destruction, but only if he is bent to our will. His words slithered into the hearts of his listeners. Fear of chaos and hunger for power warred within them. Malvic saw it and pressed his advantage. We shall not merely suppress forbidden arts, we shall claim them. Spread whispers of soul binding among the lesser houses, enough to breed dependence. Let them dabble, let them hunger, and when their thirst grows unbearable, we shall be the well from which they drink. You mean, a mage whispered, to make soul magic a weapon of state? I mean, Malric said, his pale eyes glinting, to make it the foundation of a new order. Rumors spread like wildfire through Arendor. Servants whispered of nobles vanishing into shadowed chambers and returning changed, eyes hollowed, tempers sharpened, bearing strange new strength. Street urchins traded tales of souls flickering like lantern flames in alley duels. Fear and fascination entwined until no banquet, no council hall, no tavern escaped the creeping talk of forbidden magic reborn. Cale felt the weight of it too. In the training garden, he noticed servants avoiding his gaze, as though sensing something within him they could not name. Lyra sharpened her daggers in silence, her jaw tight. They know, she said one night. Know what? Cale asked, though he dreaded the answer. That power stirs in you. You cannot hide it forever. And Malric, she spat the name like poison. He will not allow you to remain free. Cale frowned. I've barely begun to understand what I am. How can he control what even I can't? Lyra's eyes softened, though her tone did not. Because he will twist your fear. He will offer you chains disguised as choices. That is his craft. Cale stared into the night sky, unease curling in his chest. Somewhere beyond those stars, the veil shimmered, waiting. In the council's inner sanctum, Malric wove his net tighter. He summoned emissaries from rival houses, feeding each a taste of power. A vial of soul essence here, a scroll of forbidden incantations there. Each gift came wrapped in promise and debt. To House Valcor, ambitious and ruthless, he offered strength to crush their rivals. To House Elaine, fearful of decline, he promised protection against unrest. To the priesthood he whispered of divine sanction, that the veil itself had chosen them as shepherds. Every faction left his chambers convinced of their singular favor, unaware that each was but a pawn on his board. But Malvric's eyes always returned to the same name, Cale Arden. He dispatched spies to shadow the boy, bribed servants in the Arden estate, seeded whispers that Cale's curse was unraveling. The nobles, once dismissive of the powerless heir, began to watch him with wary eyes. And where suspicion bloomed, danger followed. Alira felt it most keenly. Walking the marble corridors of the estate, she overheard nobles speak Cale's name with tones that chilled her. The boy grows strange, one muttered, unnatural. Another, perhaps Malvic is right. Perhaps the curse was a shield against something darker. Her heart twisted. She had loved Cale since childhood, yet now he seemed to drift further from her, drawn into shadows she could not pierce. And at the center of it all stood that servant girl, Lyra, whose eyes gleamed with secrets. She cornered Kale one evening. "Do you know what they say of you? That you are dangerous, that Malverick hunts you." Kale looked away. "They've always called me cursed. Let them talk." "Not like this, Kale," she pressed. "This isn't mockery, Kale, it's fear. And fear breeds knives in the dark." His silence told her he knew. Chaos soon spilled into the streets. Rival houses clashed, wielding stolen soul magic like drunken men with fire. Fights erupted in taverns, duels scarred the markets, and ordinary folk whispered prayers as the air thickened with unease. In the citadel, Malverick smiled. Disorder was the forge of his order. The people, desperate for peace, would soon beg for his control. And when they did, he would present them their savior. Cale Arden, bound and broken, remade as the key to the veil. Yet not all bent so easily. In the shadows of the estate garden, Cale and Lyra stood together, their bond of fragile defiance against the tide. "Malverick spreads his poison," Lyra murmured. "Soon he will come for you." Cale clenched his fists, the spark of power flaring in his veins. "Then let him come. I will not be his pawn." Her gaze lingered on him, conflicted, half warning, half pride. "Be careful, Cale. Defy him, and you may find fate itself your enemy." Cale met her eyes, his voice steady. "Then I'll defy fate, too." And though Lyra said nothing, the faintest trace of hope stirred within her, fragile as dawn. The storm began without warning. One moment, the night sky above Arendor was calm, the veil shimmering faintly like a silver curtain drawn across the heavens. The next, a pulse of power rippled outward from the citadel, a shudder that made every lantern flicker and every soul instinctively recoil. Cale felt it strike his chest like a hammer, his breath faltering as shadows thickened around the estate. Lyra staggered beside him, clutching her head. Her knees buckled and she fell to the grass with a strangled cry. Cale knelt instantly, gripping her shoulders. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Her eyes, usually sharp and steady, now blazed with a feverish light. Memories not her own, voices from battles past, roared through her skull. The assassin she had once been, the killer Nexira, the blade of the veil, was clawing its way back to the surface. Above them, upon the terrace of the citadel, High Seer Malverick stood cloaked in darkness. His arms were raised, his voice carrying like a serpent's hiss over the wind. "Awaken, Shadowborn. Let the blood you once spilled be spilled again. Tear free from your cage, assassin." "No," she whispered, trembling. "No, I buried her. I am not—" But the spell coiled around her like chains of fire. Her body arched, her scream ripping through the garden as a crimson aura erupted from her skin. The weak servant's frame seemed to harden, her movements quicken, her very breath turning sharp and violent. Cale's heart sank. He knew what was happening. Malverick had forced her dormant instincts awake, dragging the assassin's soul into dominance. "Lyra, listen to me," he begged, gripping her arm. "Fight it! You're stronger than this." She turned toward him, but her eyes were no longer hers. They glowed with cold, merciless fury. Her dagger flashed into her hand, a movement so swift it blurred. Cale barely dodged, the blade grazing his cheek. "Lyra!" his voice cracked. "It's me!" But she was already moving, a storm of strikes and slashes, each one deadly precise. Cale stumbled back, parrying clumsily with a training blade he had snatched from the rack. Sparks flew as steel met steel. He had trained with her, learned her rhythm, yet now her movements were sharper, faster, feral. "This isn't you," he shouted, blocking another strike that numbed his arm. "You're not Malverick's puppet." Her expression twisted, half anguish, half rage. "I can't stop."
The garden became a battlefield. Statues shattered, trees split, marble cracked beneath the fury of her blows. Servants fled in terror, and from the distance nobles gathered on balconies, watching with horrified fascination as the cursed heir fought the assassin they once thought a mere servant. Kel's lungs burned, but he refused to strike her back. Every fiber of him screamed to defend, to retaliate, but his heart would not allow it. This was Lyra, his Lyra, the one who had trained him, challenged him, believed in him when no one else did. "I won't hurt you," he gasped, even as blood seeped from a cut on his shoulder. "I'd rather die than raise my blade against you." His words made her falter, if only for a heartbeat. Her dagger wavered, and pain flickered in her glowing eyes. For a moment, Kel glimpsed the woman beneath the frenzy, the fragile thread of her will still fighting. But Malrig's voice cut through the night again, cold and commanding. "Strike him down, Shadowborn. He is your weakness. End him, and you will be free." Lyra screamed, clutching her head, torn between voices. "No, I won't. I can't." Her dagger flew, aimed at Kel's heart. Time seemed to slow. Kel saw the blade, saw the anguish in her eyes, saw the destiny he had tried so hard to escape. And in that instant, he made his choice. He stepped forward, not back. The blade pierced his chest. Lyra's scream tore through the garden as Kel's body shuddered against hers. She dropped the weapon instantly, catching him before he fell. His blood stained her hands, warm and unrelenting. "No, no, no, Kale!" she cried, shaking him. Why would you do this?" His lips curved in a faint, pained smile. "Because I promised I'd never hurt you." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her forehead to his, desperate, trembling. "Don't you dare leave me! Don't you dare!" The aura around her flickered, then shattered like glass. The assassin's instincts dissolved, consumed by her grief and horror. Mulrig's control slipped away, and for the first time, the High Seer's composure cracked. "This was not the outcome I foretold," he hissed, retreating into shadow. "But the veil has many paths, and I will claim him yet." His voice faded, leaving only silence. Lyra ran up Kale's body, rocking him as though by sheer will she could anchor his soul. His blood soaked into her dress, into the earth, into her very being. She pressed her hands over the wound, whispering frantic spells, prayers, anything that might hold him here. "Stay with me, please, Kale. You can't leave me. Not now, not when I—" Her voice broke. "Not when I finally found you." His hand lifted weakly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Lyra, don't cry. You're stronger than this." She shook her head violently. "Not without you." His eyes, dimming, lingered on hers with quiet devotion. "Then let me be your strength. Always. Even beyond the veil." And with that his hand fell limp. Lyra's scream shattered the night. It was not the cry of an assassin, nor of a sorceress, but of a woman broken, hollowed by loss. Her tears mingled with his blood as she clutched him to her chest, her voice raw with grief. Around them the nobles whispered, some in horror, some in awe. The cursed boy had died a hero. The assassin had wept like a lover. And somewhere in the shadows, Mulric's schemes twisted into new forms. But for Lyra, none of it mattered. There was only Kale, his body still, his warmth fading, his soul slipping into the veil. She pressed one last trembling kiss to his forehead, her whisper lost in the night. "I'll find you, no matter the cost." And the garden, once filled with fury and fire, lay silent, but for the sound of her broken sobs. The pyres were lit at dawn. Arendur's skies were gray, heavy with clouds, as though the heavens themselves mourned. A sea of nobles, servants, and soldiers gathered on the stone terraces of the citadel to witness the funeral of Kael Ardeen, the cursed heir who had defied destiny in his final breath. Lyra stood among them, her figure cloaked in black. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. She had not spoken since that night in the garden, save for the single word she whispered again and again when no one could hear: his name. On the platform of marble and ash, Kael's body lay wrapped in silken cloth. The fire crackled slowly to life, devouring the shrouds, curling around the form beneath. The scent of incense mixed with the bitter smoke, rising into the heavy air. Alara, dressed in mourning white, stepped forward to speak. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Kael Ardeen was mocked, cast aside, and called powerless. Yet in the end, he gave his life not for glory, not for recognition, but for love and loyalty. He was braver than any of us deserved. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some wept quietly, others lowered their heads in shame. For all the years they had whispered of Kael's curse, he had left them with the legacy that burned brighter than any prophecy. But Lyra heard none of it. Her gaze was fixed on the fire, her ears filled not with words, but with whispers. They came softly, like a breath against the soul. Lyra. Her heart lurched. She gripped the railing of the terrace, her knuckles white. No one else reacted, no one else seemed to hear. The fire consumed the last of Kael's form, and yet the voice lingered. Do not weep. I am not gone. The veil, it holds me. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the smoke. She dared not speak aloud, but her soul reached back. Kael, is it truly you? A silence, then a faintest reply. I am here, between worlds, bound as I was at birth, but now freer than before. The veil does not claim me wholly. I wait. For you. Her breath caught. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the echo of his spirit. Hope sparked against the crushing weight of grief. But as quickly as it came, the whisper faded, leaving only the crackle of flames and the hollow murmur of the crowd. Her tears slid silently down her cheeks. She turned from the pyre before the ashes had cooled, her steps slow, her presence unnoticed by the mourners. She wandered through the empty halls of the estate, her mind a storm. Each corridor whispered memories. Kael training, Kael laughing, Kael bleeding in her arms. Her heart ached with every echo. When she reached the secluded garden where he had fallen, she collapsed to her knees. The marble was still stained faintly with his blood. She touched the mark with trembling fingers, her breath breaking. I failed you, she whispered. I was too weak to fight him, too blind to see Malric's snare. You paid the price, and now I'm left with nothing. The wind stirred, carrying the faint rustle of the veil. But no whisper answered this time. Only silence pressed around her. Her sorrow hardened slowly into something colder, sharper. She rose unsteadily, her eyes no longer only wet with grief, but burning with fury. If Malric thinks he's won, he is mistaken. He shattered my heart, but he gave me a weapon. I know the veil listens. I know Kael lingers. If fate dares to bind him, I will tear fate apart. Her voice echoed in the darkness, a vow that made even the shadows tremble. From that moment, Lyra disappeared from the eyes of Arendor. The nobles whispered that she had fled in shame. The servants told tales of the assassin returning to her old ways. The council spread rumors that she had perished in grief. But none knew the truth. She had gone into the underbelly of the realm, into caverns where forbidden spells were etched, into ruins where the veil's power bled raw. She searched relentlessly, day and night, for the knowledge that would allow her to unbind what the council had sealed, to tear the veil open if she must.
Every spell she learned, every fragment she claimed, was fueled not by ambition or vengeance alone, but by love. Kale's face haunted her dreams. His voice lingered in her heart. His sacrifice replayed endlessly behind her closed eyes. And with each passing day, her resolve deepened. She would not rest. She would not break. She would remake the world itself if it meant reaching him again. Far away, in his sanctum, Malric watched through scrying flames. His lips curled into a smile as he saw her path unfold. "Good," he murmured. "Let her rage. Let her tear the veil. For when she does, the power that spills forth will not be hers to command, but mine." The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting the promise of chaos yet to come. Meanwhile, across the veil, Cale drifted in a realm of silver twilight. He was not fully alive nor wholly dead. He felt Lyra's vows, her fury, her love, resonating through the thin fabric that bound them. He reached toward her, though distance stretched vast between them. "Lyra, wait for me. I will not let you fight alone." And so the season closed, with Cale's ashes scattered to the wind, Lyra vanishing into the shadows with vengeance blazing in her heart, and the veil itself trembling at the storm their love had awakened. The world of Arendor would never be the same.